Is this thing on? Hello? Hello? Looks on. Yeah. Hello there, I'm Matt Damour of the Link newspaper and 99% Media. Let me begin by saying happy holidays, and you can tell it's the holidays because there's a Christmas tree behind me and it's raining outside. So there you go. In the spirit of YouTubing and end-of-the-year goodness, I've decided to put together a small top 10 list of notable events that I covered over the year, sort of a trip down memory lane. Now keep in mind this isn't a top 10 list in terms of the most important things that happen, but they are events that I feel are notable and worth going over as we look back at the year 2015 and look ahead at 2016. So these are actually going to be presented in a particular order that is most recent to furthest back, and we're going to be beginning with an event that took place on October 24th of this year, specifically the Montreal Police's terrorism simulation. This was a really surreal event to cover. It started off on a military base where the police and different emergency services simulated a hijacking of a public transit bus. The backdrop here was that there were terrorists who had taken over a public transit bus, taken hostages and claimed to have a chemical agent on board, and that they had actually detonated it. And even though all the media people that were in attendance watching this knew that it was staged, there was something really intense and odd in seeing this happen with all the hazmat suits and the actors doing a really convincing job of pretending that they were having seizures. And then the day eventually moved on to downtown Montreal, where there was a second simulation that involved a bomb going off outside of an army barracks and two gunmen firing on sort of armed forces members and the Montreal police coming in with ambulances. And it was sort of a siege on downtown Montreal. And the really interesting part is that you actually had bystanders in their houses who were poking their heads out of their windows just trying to figure out what the hell was going on, because there were the sounds of explosions and gunshots in downtown Montreal. Moving back now to October 7th, we had a grand masquerade protest that was organized by the student organization ASSE. It was a masquerade in that people were wearing masks during the protest, and it was sort of a tongue-in-cheek way of protesting against Montreal's controversial P6 bylaw, which forbids the wearing of masks and the covering of faces during protests. What was of particular note for me during this protest was the fact that it was very small in numbers, but the riot police presence was anything but, and they actually tried to block off access of the protest on the sidewalk. They weren't letting people walk on the sidewalk, and a lot of people were very unhappy about this, so that was definitely an interesting one to cover. And a few days before that, on October 3rd, you may remember that the Common Front of unions got together and did a really big protest, with some estimates saying that it was between 100 and 150,000 people that took to the streets in solidarity with striking public service workers. Moving on to September 21st, and this is a little bit of a selfish one, but I did want to have it on the list just to talk a little bit about this issue. But September 21st is the date where myself and other members of the independent media got a chance to sit down and meet with the Montreal Police Department, specifically Commander Ian Lafrenière, who's in charge of public and media relations, to discuss the issue of independent citizen and student journalists being harassed, assaulted, and sometimes denied access during protests. And we really want to start a dialogue to try and solve this, because it's one thing to be upset about it and to speak out about it, but we really want to do something constructive. So we actually met with the SPVM in conjunction with Canadian Journalists for Free Expression. The president of that organization, Tom Hennifer, came down from Toronto to sit in on the meeting and to have a press conference with us afterwards. We're still sort of hashing out the details of how we're going to be moving forward to try and ensure the safety and access of independent student journalists, but it was a positive step, and I look forward to updating you more on what comes out of that meeting. Now come back with me, if you will, to the summer. The summer. August 16th. Montreal Pride. The Gay Pride Parade this year was something to behold, and it was taking place in the full swing of federal election season, which means that most of the major candidates for the federal parties were there, except of course for Stephen Harper, who had never attended a Pride Parade in Montreal, but we did have Justin Trudeau, Thomas Mulcair, Gilles Duceppe, and Elizabeth May. And this was of particular interest because it actually gave me the opportunity to ask our now Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, a question. It was a little bit of a softball, but I wasn't going to grill him too hard considering the fact that he was walking in front of his float and shaking hands with people, so I just wanted to throw in a quick question. But the reason it was significant for me is I got to see the master at work. Once I asked him this question, he just went into full-on PR mode, and it was kind of astonishing to watch just how proficient he was at answering media questions. Mr. Trudeau, how do you feel about Stephen Harper not showing up today?
You know what, he doesn't show up at any prides. It's really disappointing, and I look forward to making sure that the Prime Minister's there next year. Happy Pride!
About a week before, we're talking about August 8th, we had a demonstration at Norman Bethune Square near Concordia University against the blogger Rouge V's visit to Montreal. Of course, a lot of you know that Rouge V is a... what do you even call... I don't know. I don't know what you call him. He's a pickup artist? He's a pickup artist, and he's got sort of a loyal following of people who swear by his tactics, and some people feel that his tactics sort of blur the lines between pursuing somebody and sometimes sexual assault or making people feel uncomfortable. And this was kind of an odd one specifically because there was an open forum for people to come up and speak and share their thoughts. And one individual came up and sort of started giving this very rambling explanation of why he was there, and became very apparent very quickly that he maybe didn't share the same perspective as some of the feminist protesters that were there. And eventually he got quite agitated and was glitter bombed. And he didn't take that too well. Speaking once again about the federal election, we move back to August 2nd, which was the kickoff date for this particular federal election cycle, when then Prime Minister Stephen Harper kicked off his campaign actually in Montreal. Now, I put this on the list for sort of personal significance. It was the first time that I had covered a federal election event, and there was actually a little bit of to-do about it. I had contacted the head of communications for the Conservative Party in Quebec, and specifically told him that I was planning on covering this event for a student newspaper, the Link newspaper at Concordia, and he gave me the green light, told me where to go, told me to go pick up a press pass. But when I got there, Conservative Party volunteers told me that it was a standing policy for the Conservatives that they didn't let student press into their campaign events. After appealing this decision and waiting roughly an hour, I was eventually let in, but told very clearly by a communications staffer that this was, quote, an exception. Now we move back to May Day. May Day, the 1st of May 2015 in downtown Montreal. What a day that was. It started off with a rather large protest in the morning, and that sort of extended into different activities in the afternoon. But the real action started in the nighttime protest, which went on for quite a while, but was cut off very early in the evening. People left from Phillips Square, and after about 15 to 20 minutes, we already had clashes between police and some of the more militant protesters on the corner of de Maisonneuve and McGill College Avenue. Protesters launched sort of smoke bombs, and I think one person had a fire extinguisher that he was using to try and obscure the vision of some Sûreté du Québec riot police. But very quickly afterwards, on the intersection of McGill College Avenue and St. Catherine, police moved into the center of this very large protest, cut it in half, and launched tear gas in the direction of both halves of the protest, and that just wreaked havoc because we're talking about around 7 p.m. downtown Montreal on a Friday. So chaos ensued after that, and it was quite an interesting event to have to cover and quite intense. Another sort of selfish one for personal reasons that I'm putting this on here, but July 24th, there was a protest that took place in solidarity with the Unistoten camp in BC. I was covering this protest, which had about maybe 50 to 100 participants, and eventually I was actually detained while that protest was going on by a police officer.
Ferme ça, là. OK, c'est bon. Ferme-les. Non, je vais pas le fermer, je suis en direct.
But I still think it's a significant event to bring up in this video, specifically because I think that that police officer overstepped his bounds and definitely infringed on my rights as guaranteed by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, specifically Article 2B, freedom of expression and freedom of the press is very important in the spirit of the Charter. And that brings us to the last item on this list, and who can forget April 8th, Occupation UQAM. For those of you who don't recall or didn't see this saga unfold, essentially the Université du Québec à Montréal had a lot of striking students, and there were definitely some pickets and things like that. People were blocking access to classes. And on April 8th, the administration of the school actually called in police to the inside of the school where arrests were made, and there were some really outstanding images of riot police in full gear going into the school to apprehend people. Now, I was actually at work when that happened in the morning, and once I saw that this was going down, I knew that there was going to be more throughout the day. So I got to UQAM as soon as possible and went to the GIA de Sèvres building, where I started to hear rumblings of an occupation that was going to take place. And sure enough, people started barricading the exits and entrances, and put a call out on social media for people to come down to GIA de Sèvres and help with this occupation. I stayed in the building to observe what was going on, and it turns out that I was one of very few journalists that was inside the building to witness what was going on. In a sort of clandestine fashion, I did a small live stream from inside the building, and that sort of got the word out, and a lot of people started following me on my live stream. The next morning I found out that about 20,000 people had viewed that live stream because they really wanted to know what was happening at that moment. I did eventually get myself out of the building and follow the riot police response as they got into the building and started apprehending people, and also of personal significance because it was the night that I first got tear gassed. Certainly not the last.
Oh, God.
Get yourself.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna get away because I got some of that in my eye. Shit. Ah. Oh boy. Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna take a second here.
So there you have it, 10 items of note from the last year of coverage that I've done. Thank you very much for all the people who have followed me this year, and hopefully you'll stick with me in 2016. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more interesting events that I'll be covering and live streaming. So thank you very much. Happy holidays. Have a candy cane. It's plastic. Take the plastic off, have a candy cane.